Hi, I'm Milas. They laughed when I showed up alone to my own birthday dinner, sat me by the restroom, served me cake with someone else's name on it, and toasted to my absence like I was a ghost they could joke about. But what they didn't know was that the husband they mocked me for not having was already waiting outside. What do you do when your family edits you out of the picture on purpose? When they crop you out not by accident, but by design? What happens when you stop being quiet and start walking away, with the keys to the roles they never saw coming? I pulled into the parking lot earlier than planned, the sun still low enough to cast forgiving shadows across my dashboard. The air smelled like jasmine and car exhaust, Texas spring in its usual contradiction. I sat there for a second longer, watching as a valet boy adjusted his tie in the side mirror of a BMW he wasn't old enough to rent. The invitation had said 6, but I'd shown up at 5:43. Classic Melis, early to things I wasn't sure I was wanted at. I looked down at the wine bottle in the passenger seat. Not vintage, but decent. Something I'd drink on nights when I needed to feel like a person, not a placeholder. When I walked inside the venue, I knew something was off. I knew it the way you know a storm's about to hit, even when the sky is clear. Just that weird tightness in the air. Balloons floated against a shimmering backdrop, white and gold. Signs hung above the dessert bar. Happy birthday, Elowen. Her name was everywhere. On cupcakes, printed napkins, even a looping slideshow of photos on a flat screen near the bar. There wasn't a single mention of me. I paused near the welcome table. Hey, you're early! A voice popped up behind me. Zinnia, my cousin. Always sweet to your face, sharp behind your back. Elowen's gonna freak out when she sees you made it. I smiled. Practiced. Neutral. Yeah, I figured I'd beat the rush. Grab a drink. The bar's still setting up, but I think they've got Prosecco already chilled. She didn't mention it was my birthday, too. No happy birthday, Melis. Not even a nod. I swallowed that detail like a stone. I walked slowly around the room, eyes scanning for anything that might include me. Nothing. My name wasn't on the cake, not the signage, not even a placeholder at the head table. I found the seating chart next to a garland of roses and eucalyptus. My name was scribbled in gold ink. Table 9, corner of the room, near the restroom. The scent hit me before I even sat down. Disinfectant mixed with something fried. My table was set for 4, but only one chair pulled out. No candles. Napkins weren't folded like the others, just stacked. I slipped into the chair and texted Dorian. Me. Don't worry about showing up. I'll make it through. Him. Let me know if it stops feeling worth it. I put the phone away and looked around. Everyone else was already congregating near the main table. Laughing, hugging, taking selfies under the Elibration sign. A server passed by, dropped a small appetizer plate in front of me without eye contact. Thanks, I said. No response. Aunt Rosalind passed behind me and whispered, not quietly enough. She still comes alone, poor thing. Her tone had that soft judgment women reserve for unmarried relatives and expired produce. I turned my head, caught her eye. She froze, then scurried off like I was contagious. My cousin Bryn came by briefly, fiddling with her champagne flute. You look rested, she said. I didn't know exhaustion was my brand. She laughed, then muttered something about checking on her toddler and left before I could ask if that toddler was now drinking. I tried to focus on my food. A few people waved from across the room, small, detached waves. The kind you give someone you recognize but can't place. I waved back. Eventually, the cake rolled out. 3 tiers, white frosting with delicate pink florals and gold cursive. Happy birthday, Elowen. No ampersand. No second name squeezed in. Just her. The fork felt heavy in my hand. I cut a small piece, lifted it, and stared at it a moment. Just as I was about to take a bite, the door swung open again. Laughter exploded from the entrance like a stage cue. And in that second, I knew. I could vanish, and no one would notice. The fork never made it to my mouth. As the door flung open behind me, the room erupted in another wave of delighted shrieks and clapping. I turned slightly in my seat, enough to see Elowen breezing in like a pageant winner 5 minutes late on purpose. She wore something white and backless, the kind of dress that required confidence, spray tan, and 2 types of tape to stay up. Naturally, she had all 3. She started doing her rounds, air kisses, compliments. "It's been forever," lies. I watched her float from group to group, like a hostess at a party she'd forgotten she didn't own. No one looked toward me. I sat there, invisible in plain sight, a piece of furniture they hadn't figured out how to replace yet. "Still flying solo?" A voice leaned down from behind me. It was Darren, a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a year. He smelled like vodka and some kind of cologne you'd buy from the gas station counter. I gave him a half smile. "Still flying, Darren." He laughed too loudly, like he didn't hear the bitterness tucked between my syllables. Funny how people ask questions they already think they know the answers to, and they always hope it hurts. Elowen finally made it near my corner. She gave me a once-over, her eyes scanning my dress, then my face, like I was a gallery piece she'd seen once and decided she didn't care for. "Mylis," she said, arms opening with a dramatic flare. "You made it!" I did. I stood, accepting the hug that never fully closed. Her perfume stung, a scent that tried too hard to smell like success. Our mother arrived moments later. Isolde. Always sharply dressed, always scanning a room like it owed her something. She looked at me, smiled the way people do when they're about to say something they think is kind. "I was telling Elowen just yesterday," she began. "Maybe this is the year someone finally sees what you have to offer." There it was. The kind of compliment that came gift-wrapped in barbed wire. I took a breath, slow and steady. "Someone already did," I replied, not flinching. "He just doesn't find these parties as amusing as you do." That earned me a pause, a blink too long from Elowen. But before she could respond, a high-pitched voice called her name from across the room, and she drifted away with another smile that didn't reach her eyes. Passive aggression is still aggression, I muttered to myself, just in heels and lipstick. Later, I found myself near the bar when a tall woman with a practiced smile tapped my arm. "You must be Avery, Elowen's friend, right?" I stared at her, expression flat. "Actually, I'm her sister, but you're close. Avery's our dog." A beat of silence. Then laughter, awkward and too loud. A few heads turned. The woman blushed, mumbling something about faces and names. I didn't laugh. I looked around. No one corrected her. No one apologized. They just moved on. When they mistake you for the pet, maybe it's time to stop expecting to be treated like family. My mother, who'd witnessed the exchange, chuckled like I'd told a joke. "She's always had a dark sense of humor," she said to no one in particular. I excused myself, walked briskly to the powder room. Inside, the light was too white, too harsh. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same calm. "You don't need them to remember your name," I whispered, "if you never plan to stay." I splashed cold water on my wrists, gave myself a moment, then stepped back out, ready to return to my quiet corner. But when I got there, someone else was in my seat. They didn't look up, didn't hesitate, just assumed the empty chair had always been empty. I stood behind it for 5 full seconds before anyone realized I had been sitting there all along. I stood there, still behind the chair that no longer belonged to me. No one noticed. Or maybe they did, and pretended not to. I took a breath, turned slowly, and walked toward the dessert table. The far corner of the room, again. My default habitat. I settled into an empty chair that hadn't been assigned to anyone. The linen was wrinkled, the utensils slightly off-center. Fitting. A server passed by, gave me a half-smile before setting down a plate of untouched tiramisu I hadn't ordered. It sat in front of me like a peace offering I never asked for. From this angle, I could see most of the room. The way people leaned in when Elowen spoke, the way they nodded with polite awe, as if her opinions were gospel. She was holding court again, and her crown was secured with applause. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the aroma anchor me. I didn't want to spiral, but as I sat there, memories crept in like vines through old windows. Prom night. I hadn't thought about that evening in years. I'd waited by the front entrance of the school gym in a navy dress I'd saved for months to afford. My date, who later told me he forgot, never showed. I spent most of that night standing next to the punch table, trying to pretend I was just taking a break from dancing. I've always had a habit of mistaking patience for dignity, I whispered into the rim of my coffee mug. Just then, the crowd parted slightly. Alawan reappeared in my line of sight, this time with Grant. My chest tightened before my brain could catch up. He looked the same, still broad-shouldered, still wearing his guilt like an expensive suit. His hand rested on the small of Alawan's back, fingers curved in a way I remembered too well. They weren't just together, they were performing together. United, smug, polished. I didn't blink. But when Grant's eyes met mine, just for a split second, something flickered. Recognition, regret, or just strategy. He leaned in and kissed Alawan on the cheek. That moment cracked something. Not because I still wanted him, but because she knew exactly what she was doing. And so did he. Some betrayals are so silent, they echo louder than screams. Before I could move, Uncle Lewis strolled by with a cocktail in hand, saw me watching the pair, and smirked. "It's like prom night again, huh, Milas?" he said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "You always flew solo, didn't you?" A few people laughed, not cruelly, just casually. The way people laugh at reruns they've seen too many times. My grip tightened around the wine glass. I forced myself to place it down before I shattered it against the table. Funny how they remember the things that made me small, I thought, but forget the things that made me survive. I stood up, steady, unshaken, walked across the room toward Alawan. She turned as I approached, that same smooth smile on her face, like she already had the upper hand. "Was this necessary?" I asked quietly, not bothering to fake a smile. Her eyes sparkled with mock innocence. "I thought you were over him. I mean, it's been years, right?" I held her gaze. "I am. I just didn't know you were ever under him." For the first time that night, the room went completely silent. The impact of my words landed not with volume, but with precision. A scalpel, not a hammer. Alawan's lips tightened. Her expression didn't falter, but something behind her eyes did. She stepped in closer, leaned just enough that only I could hear her. "Well," she whispered, "let's see if you're still this bold by dessert." I didn't know what she meant then, but it wouldn't take long before I found out. By the time I made it back to my table, the chair was once again empty, like it had never held anyone with a name or a reason to exist. The napkin was gone. My untouched water glass had been cleared. Someone had even smoothed out the indentation I left on the cushion. I sat without bothering to adjust anything. I didn't need comfort. I needed distance. Laughter burst from the main table again. Alawan's table. It was the kind that was just a little too loud, a little too rehearsed, like an inside joke that excluded anyone with real bills and fewer filters. I glanced down at my dress. Soft blue cotton linen blend, 3/4 sleeve. Simple, clean, and yes, affordable. The kind of outfit that says you pay your rent on time and still remember birthdays, even when yours isn't remembered back. "It's wild how much effort it takes to feel invisible," I murmured, tracing the edge of the tablecloth with one finger. A sudden clinking of glass cut through the room. I looked up. My cousin Erica stood, smiling wide, holding her flute high. "To Eloween," she said. "Our pride, our queen of everything. Happy birthday, darling." The room erupted in applause. Elowen lifted her glass, with the subtle grace of someone who expects champagne, to follow her around like a loyal dog. I, out of reflex, raised mine too. Not high, not dramatic. Just enough to honor the illusion that I mattered. No one clinked. I held it in the air for a breath too long, then brought it to my lips. To me, too, I whispered, but I guess I've always been the silent co-host. I drained the glass, not like I needed it, but like I was tired of pretending I didn't. The applause died down. The music resumed, a soft jazz number from a playlist Elowen probably curated herself, then outsourced for polish. I let the rhythm of the saxophone mask the beat of my pulse. Just as I started to sink into the background again, Zinnia's voice rang out across the table. Elowen, that dress is just breathtaking. You can always tell when something's custom, you know? Elowen tilted her head, accepting the compliment like it was part of her inheritance. Zinnia turned to me, already halfway into her smirk. Yours is sweet. Target? She said it like it was a species of insect. I blinked once, then smiled. Actually, yes, I said. It was either this or a donation to your OnlyFans. I figured this had longer shelf life. The silence was immediate. For a beat, it was thick enough to chew. Then came the fake laughter, the kind that burns your throat going down. A few chuckled out of politeness. A few turned away, pretending to check their phones. Zinnia didn't say anything else. She looked like she was trying to decide if she'd just been insulted or recruited. I leaned back in my chair. Earlier that week, I'd stood inside a boutique window, staring at a $600 dress. It had a neckline I couldn't breathe in, and a tag that screamed validation. For a moment, I almost reached for my card. Almost. Instead, I sent that money to Carla, my oldest friend. Her son needed dental surgery, and the insurance barely covered a cleaning. I don't wear my worth on a tag, I thought now, sipping water slowly. I wear it in my choices. The dessert tray rolled into view, a polished cart with tiered selections and a dramatic chocolate drizzle zigzagging down the sides of a glass platter. And then I saw it. The cake. 3 layers of gold-dusted vanilla, perfectly centered. Pink flowers along the edge. And carved across the top in looping, flawless calligraphy. Happy birthday, Elowen. Nothing else. No ampersand. No second name squeezed in. No room for another. I didn't need a slice. I'd already tasted what being forgotten felt like. The cake was being sliced in the center of the room when I returned, just in time to catch the thick golden icing curl off the knife like butter. I wasn't offered a slice. Not immediately. Instead, I watched plates pass hand to hand, landing gracefully in front of cousins and distant aunts, each of them giving that automatic nod of approval like it was instinct. When Isolde finally glanced toward me, she tilted her head with the soft concern of someone pretending to be maternal. They probably assumed you didn't want any sugar, she said, her voice too even. You're always watching your figure, aren't you? I tilted my head right back, eyes steady. No worries, I replied, lips barely curving. I'm sweet enough already. She didn't laugh. She didn't have to. That line wasn't for her anyway. I stood and made my way toward the buffet. The smell of warm chafing dishes and overheard conversations swirled into one cloudy reminder of why I hated events that relied on seating charts and forced toasts. As I reached for a serving spoon, a voice called out behind me, familiar and just grating enough. So what do you do now? Still freelancing, or... I turned and faced Mark, a friend of Elowen's husband. He smiled like he'd already delivered a punchline. Before I could say a word, Isolde appeared over my shoulder like a stage cue. She's taking a little creative sabbatical, she offered. Her voice dipped in southern sugar. Right, sweetie? I blinked once. No, I said, sharper than I intended. I'm designing the new community gallery wing for the city. There was a pause. Mark looked surprised. Isolde kept smiling. But I get it, I added. It doesn't really count if it's not billable, right? He let out a polite chuckle, the kind people use when they're not sure if you're joking or threatening to embarrass them. I turned away before either of them could ask for more. Silence used to be my defense. Today, I think I'll try something new. Clarity. Back at my table, I barely touched the food on my plate. I could hear Zinnia's voice across the room, rising above the small talk like a siren. Speaking of art, she beamed. Did you all see my reel from Coachella? It hit 50K views in a day. A ripple of excitement moved down the table like wind catching a cheap tablecloth. I raised my glass quietly and tapped the rim with my nail. You know what else draws attention fast? I said to no one and everyone. Fire alarms. It earned a few glances. Enough. I stood. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, I began, projecting just enough. But since we're all celebrating this gallery, my name will be etched into the cornerstone, permanently, just in case anyone forgets again. There it was. Not defiance, just truth. The table quieted. Soft, hesitant claps began. A few from the younger guests, unsure if they were allowed. A few from those who recognized something different in me tonight. Elowen raised her glass. Well, she said, with the kind of grin you offer a child after they color inside the lines. We're proud of you. Truly. You always do something. I met her eyes. Better something authentic than everything performative. That landed. The air shifted again. Less applause, more recalculation. I sat back down, heart steady. Then I saw it. A napkin, folded neatly in front of me. Unassuming, written in narrow, cursive letters. Don't push too hard. We all have pasts we don't want reopened. No signature. But I didn't need one. I recognized the handwriting. And I knew Elowen had just played her next card. The napkin was still in my hand. I'd folded it twice, then again, tighter, smaller, until it was barely the size of a playing card. I held onto it like it was evidence, though deep down, I already knew who had written the warning. Elowen's penmanship had a flourish, too elegant to be kind. Just like her. I walked toward the kitchen, not really looking at anyone. I wasn't sure what I needed. Air, maybe? Space. A moment to stop pretending. The servers barely glanced up as I entered the staff corridor behind the buffet tables. The lights were harsher there, no jazz in the background, just the clatter of plates and the steady hum of refrigeration units. I didn't expect to see it so soon, but there it was, half covered by a crumpled linen napkin and a discarded bouquet of half-wilted flowers. The bakery box. My heart thudded. I reached for it. The lid was askew, the inside untouched. The sticker on the corner still read, Happy Birthday, Malis, in the same delicate calligraphy I'd requested. The cake itself, hand-picked from Althea's, the same bakery my father used to take me to when he wanted to celebrate something, anything, just between us. The scent of almond and raspberry still lingered, despite the chill of the trash bin. The card I'd tucked under the ribbon was still there, slightly smudged. It wasn't the cake they tossed. It was the intention. I pulled the card out gently, wiped off a speck of frosting, and slid it into my clutch, like it was a photograph of a crime scene. One of the kitchen staff, a young woman with kind eyes, glanced my way. I'm sorry, she said softly, like she had no right to say it. Someone said it wasn't needed anymore. I thought it looked nice, though. It was for me, I replied, holding her gaze. But apparently, I'm not needed either. I left before she could respond. Back in the dining room, the lights had dimmed slightly. Elowen stood at the front, microphone in hand, her voice perfectly modulated to project warmth. I just want to say thank you to everyone who made tonight so special, she began. I returned to my table and sat without speaking. The note in my clutch burned like a coal I couldn't drop. I couldn't have done it without Auntie June's help. And Zinnia, of course, for curating the aesthetic. You are a star. More applause. To Clara and Rebecca for organizing the dessert table. And a huge thanks to our florist who turned this room into magic. She kept going, name after name, as if she were reading the credits of a film she had written, directed, and starred in. My name never came. A woman seated to my left leaned closer and whispered, "Didn't you do the booking for this place?" I smiled without moving my eyes. Apparently not enough to make the roll call. The woman frowned slightly, then turned away. She knew. They all knew. But knowing didn't mean acting. I stopped pretending to smile. I didn't nod or raise my glass. I just watched. Not like a sister, like a journalist, like someone collecting footage for the closing arguments. They didn't just forget me. They remembered to exclude me. I pulled out my phone under the table and finally replied to Dorian's text from earlier. Me. If you're nearby, keep the engine running. I pressed send and returned the phone to my bag. Across the room, Elowen caught my eye. She wasn't smiling. Not exactly. There was something else. Calculation. She looked like a chess player waiting for the next move. As I lifted my water glass, her gaze didn't waver. It wasn't smug. It was measured. She wasn't waiting for me to leave. She was waiting for me to crack. I didn't break. But I knew then, I wasn't going to leave quietly either. I sat back down and felt something inside me shift. Not a break, but an alignment. The napkin still in my clutch, its threatening message folded tight against the lining. I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just watched. There's a quiet power in refusing to perform. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. Instagram notification. Zinnia had tagged Elowen in a story titled Family Only. I clicked it. A looping video of the cake cutting, Elowen laughing, the crowd cheering, the toast. There were 10 seconds of swirling confetti and hugs, just feet from where I sat. I wasn't in a single frame. I'd been closer to the camera than most of them, still, somehow invisible. Without thinking, I tapped the little heart icon to send a reaction. Just a simple emoji. A heart. Zinnia noticed. She turned around not 30 seconds later, already tucking her phone back into her clutch. Her smile was nervous, rehearsed. Oh my God, Malis, I didn't mean to miss you. It's just stories are so short, you know? I smiled just as tightly. So's the patience of the people you erase. The table hushed. A glass clinked, somewhere. Noise filled the air again, but slower now. Less sure. Moments later, Elowen began opening her gifts, her stage again. She peeled back tissue paper, with exaggerated gasps, lifted each item like it was sacred. Everyone applauded as if these were relics, not handbags and candles. Then she held up a wooden frame with a hand-painted quote. I froze. I had painted it. Late at night, 2 weeks ago, hunched over my desk with an aching back and a podcast playing in the background. The colors were chosen specifically to match her guest room. The quote was from our father. She read the tag aloud. With love, from Bryn. My hand curled into my lap. I inhaled through my nose, exhaled through clenched teeth. I stood and walked over to the event planner, a woman in a black dress with a clipboard and a headset. Excuse me, I said softly. Where did the gift tags come from? She smiled. Oh, Elowen sent them ahead of time. Said she'd take care of all the names to save us time. Of course she did. I approached Elowen. She was still smiling, still milking the room. I leaned in, close enough that no one else could hear. You can put someone else's name on my gift, I said, steady. But it's still my brushstroke they're clapping for. She blinked. Just once. Then turned to the crowd and said loudly, Oh, Malis! That frame must have reminded Bryn of you. Isn't it perfect how it all came together? The room giggled, polite, unsure. I straightened. It didn't come together. It was taken apart, like everything else you couldn't bear to let me have. The silence this time was clean, uncluttered, not shocked, just waiting. Isolde muttered, not even looking up. Not tonight, girls. I turned to her. Tonight's exactly right. And then I walked back to my table. At least, I tried to. Someone else was sitting there. Elowen's assistant. Her blazer still had the event pin attached. She didn't even glance up when I approached, already flipping through her notes on a clipboard. No one moved. No one suggested she get up. My bag, my glass, even my water bottle had vanished. I didn't ask for my seat back. I was done asking for things that should have been mine to begin with. The clinking of silverware had softened into background noise. drowned out by the faint buzz of polite conversation and the occasional flash of a phone camera. Someone nearby mentioned the words dessert bar, and chairs scraped the floor as guests moved toward the next indulgence. I stayed seated, watching. I could feel the tension in my jaw long before I realized I was clenching it. Then I heard my name, spoken like a footnote. "To Melis," Aunt Miriam said, raising her glass from the center table, her voice syrupy sweet, who, despite everything, still showed up tonight, and I'm sure she'll repay that $5,000 to her mother soon enough. The room didn't laugh so much as exhale nervously. A few uncomfortable chuckles. A few more lowered eyes. It hit like an inside joke only half the room was in on. And just like that, generosity became a punchline. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I raised my glass in silent salute, eyes locked with Isolde. She looked away immediately. A man to my left leaned over. "That wasn't classy," he whispered. "No," I murmured, still smiling, "but it was deliberate." I let the moment hang, let them stew in the silence they had built. Later, I walked toward the buffet line, if only to get away from the glares that had turned into pity. The kind of pity that says, "You've stayed too long." Two girls were standing near the pasta tray, whispering over their mimosas, not realizing I was close enough to hear. "Well, what else would she be here for?" one of them said. "She's not married, no kids, no real career. No one even misses her when she's not around." The other nodded, laughing into her glass. I stepped forward, gently picked up a small plate, and without looking at them said, "Funny thing about food, it nourishes everyone, not just the ones you post about." They froze. One gasped. The other turned beet red. I didn't wait for them to respond. I didn't need their apologies. The moment had already served its purpose. When you have nothing left to lose, I thought, you start speaking with the sharpness of someone who remembers everything. I carried my untouched dessert plate, not out of hunger, but out of intent, to the center of the room. My heels clicked like punctuation. I tapped my fork gently against the rim of a glass. Conversations paused. "If we're airing accounts tonight," I began, "allow me to clear mine too." A few heads turned. A few smirks curled. "I owe no one $5,000, I said calmly. "What I've given to this family came from a place of love, not a ledger. But if we're adding things up, let's go beyond money." I stepped forward. "Thank you, Elowen, for reminding me what exclusion feels like, so I'll never pass it on. Thank you, Mother, for making it crystal clear who your daughter is and who she isn't. And thank you all," I swept a hand across the crowd, "for teaching me to stop asking to be seen." Silence. Then a single clap, from Zinnia's husband surprisingly. Then another, a friend of Elowen's, who looked visibly uncomfortable. Then four more. Then half the room. The applause didn't roar. It spread like wildfire. Soft. Inevitable. Honest. Elowen stood slowly, clapping once. Deliberate, not smiling. "Well then," she said, stepping closer, "let's talk about what you really came here for." Her tone didn't scare me. But the fact that she still thought she was in control, that did. The silence that followed Elowen's challenge hung in the air like thick fog, coating everything in discomfort. I didn't respond. I didn't even blink. I scanned the room slowly. Half the guests looked down at their drinks, their phones, their shoes. Anything but me. The other half watched, hungry. Not for dessert, but for drama. For a spectacle. Elowen raised one brow, smirked, and shrugged. "Didn't think so?" That smug shrug, God, I'd seen it since we were kids. When she stole the last pancake. When she got away with skipping curfew. When she flirted with Grant behind my back. Then married him without apology. I looked around the room, eyes falling on the same people who'd clapped for my speech minutes ago. None of them moved. They weren't just bystanders, I thought. The words forming clearly in my mind. They were the audience she always counted on. My phone buzzed softly in my hand. A notification from Instagram. I didn't open it. Instead, I glanced up and caught sight of Zinnia huddled in the corner, phone in hand, thumbs moving fast, probably already posting her version of the night. I turned away and began walking toward the edge of the room, needing a breath. As I passed the dessert bar, a man I didn't know nodded at me and offered an awkward smile. I returned it with nothing. Near the window, I saw a group gathered around Zinnia's phone. The images moved fast. Her newest post was a photo carousel. Elowen cutting the cake, laughing, hugging guests. Every photo radiated warmth and unity. I wasn't in a single one, but I remembered standing right there when the photo was taken. Visible, smiling, present. I was closer to the lens than half the people in those frames. Someone had edited me out. I wasn't left out accidentally, I thought. They trimmed me like overgrown ivy. I stepped to the side and whispered to someone I trusted just enough. A friend of a friend. "Can I see your version of that cake photo?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Sure enough, in her unedited shot, there I was. Smiling. Holding the same glass. Same moment. I nodded once, pulled out my phone, and texted Dorian. 10 minutes. Be ready. When I returned to my table, my seat was missing. Not moved, not temporarily occupied. Gone. I turned to a staff member clearing nearby plates. "Was there a chair here?" She looked confused. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was told this section is reserved now." "By who?" She glanced toward the main table. "One of the assistants." I didn't ask again. I simply walked to the bar and ordered a glass of sparkling water. The bartender didn't ask questions. He just filled the glass and slid it across the counter. I raised it like a champagne flute, then drank slowly. Small sips, controlled. Toasting no one. Or maybe everyone. If I'm going to be cropped out, I thought, let them at least crop something worth fearing. I stood tall, fixed the lapel of my blazer, and walked toward the front of the room. I didn't look for faces. I didn't wait for eye contact. I wasn't seeking permission or applause. A few voices murmured my name as I passed. I didn't stop. Near the exit, I paused just briefly. The hum of conversation had resumed, but softer now, fractured. I could feel eyes on my back. And then, from outside, came the unmistakable purr of a luxury engine pulling up to the entrance. The kind of sound that turned heads. Every head in the room swiveled toward the windows. I didn't turn around. They could come to the glass if they wanted to see who I really was. The engine was so quiet, it felt like a whisper made of metal. Heads turned before the doors even opened, drawn not by sound, but by presence. The double doors of the venue creaked open, and there he was. Dorian. He didn't need an introduction. He didn't smile or wave or make eye contact with anyone inside. He just stood there in that tailored gray suit, calm and immovable, like he had always known this moment would come. I saw Elowen's hand falter midair, her wine glass tilting just slightly, the contents rippling. Then I moved. I walked with the kind of steadiness that doesn't demand attention. It commands it. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I walked toward my husband like I belonged to no one else in that room but myself. He opened the car door without saying a word. No flourish, no dramatics, just a quiet offer of presence and protection. He held out my coat, helped me slide it on like we were stepping out of a winter gala in New York, not fleeing a battleground masked as a birthday party. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. From the corner of my eye, I saw one of the older guests lean toward her husband. "That's Maëlys's husband?" she whispered. Another replied, a bit louder than he meant to. "That's her husband?" The words weren't cruel. They were stunned. Good. Let them sit with that. Let them stew in every assumption they'd ever built about who I was and who I wasn't. Before I stepped into the car, I turned. Just once. I looked at the room as a whole, not as a collection of family members, but as a stage where I'd played a role I no longer needed. I found my mother's eyes. She didn't blink. I found Elowen's. She blinked too much. "Thank you all," I said, loud enough to be heard, but not theatrical, for the reminder of who I am not. A pause. "I'll take it from here." I turned, coat swaying behind me, and slid into the back seat of the car. A few guests clapped, not with celebration, with resignation, maybe even relief. The door closed with a satisfying click, sealing the night behind me. We pulled away slowly, the headlights catching a few stunned faces as they watched us disappear. Inside the car, it was warm, still, almost too quiet. Dorian didn't ask me what happened. He just let the silence breathe. Then, finally, "Did it help?" I looked out the window, watching the buildings blur as we crossed through intersections that had always felt like home. "It didn't fix the past," I said, "but it made the next step a little lighter." He nodded, his hand finding mine in the space between us. We didn't talk about it anymore. We drove past the church where my parents renewed their vows after 30 years. Past the coffee shop where Elowen and I used to split muffins when we were teenagers. Past everything that used to feel rooted and sacred. Now it all just looked staged. Sometimes leaving isn't the end. It's the proof you never needed to stay. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Not to post, not to rant. I opened a secure document folder, tapped twice, and began transferring the gallery paperwork into my personal LLC. The light from the screen danced against the car's leather interior. I wasn't just leaving the party. I was leaving the part of me that begged to be chosen. I woke up before the sun did. Not from anxiety, not from regret. Just stillness. Austin was still quiet outside our bedroom window, the city not yet humming. I lay there in our bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan, my breath steady and mind unclouded. The air smelled faintly of coffee grounds from the automatic timer Dorian set the night before. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, its glow momentarily bright against the dim room. One message, from her. "You didn't have to embarrass her like that." No punctuation, no name. But I didn't need either. I stared at the screen, not angry, not even surprised. They've always mistaken silence for weakness, I thought, and now they're shocked to hear me speak. I didn't reply. Instead, I set the phone face down on the nightstand and stood to stretch, letting the wooden floors chill my feet into full wakefulness. An hour later, Dorian and I sat on our balcony with 2 steaming mugs between us. He didn't say anything right away. He knew better. The air was cool, the kind that whispers early autumn is coming, even when the calendar says otherwise. He sipped, then finally asked, "Did it feel like enough?" "It felt final," I said, watching the rooftops of our neighborhood light up slowly. "I don't want to be forgiven. I want to be forgotten, just not erased." He nodded. That was the thing about Dorian. He didn't try to fix what he knew was mine to carry. We talked briefly about selling the Houston property, about not going back, not even for Thanksgiving. "I've already started the paperwork," I told him. "Everything tied to the gallery will run through my own LLC now. Solo." "I figured you had," he said, reaching across the table to rest his fingers on mine. "You were always the one holding the real keys." Later that afternoon, I went through the office closet. Not looking for anything, just clearing. And there it was. A family photo from 10 years ago, framed in cherry wood, dust along the edge, but the glass still clean. I sat on the floor, legs folded, scissors in hand. For a second, I hesitated. Cutting pictures always felt brutal, final, but I'd spent a lifetime being trimmed out in silence. This time, it was my turn. I cut around my shape with care. Not rage, precision. Then, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, pulled out another photo. The gallery's groundbreaking ceremony, my name on the banner, my team behind me, my hands steady on the shovel. That went in the frame. The air in the room shifted. Subtle, but enough. By evening, I was back at the desk, laptop open, email drafted, subject, regarding future contact. I didn't rage, I didn't recount. I didn't even personalize. It was a notice, formal, firm, and unmistakably clear. I hovered over send and paused. Not for them, for me. I had one last thing to say, but not for their sake. This one was for me. I hit send. No hesitation, no dramatic pause. Subject, regarding future contact. The email was brief, polite, and final. It thanked them for memories, for mistakes, for teaching me exactly what I no longer needed. And then it ended with a line I'd rehearsed in my head for years. I will no longer attend events where I am unwelcome, unnamed, or unseen. Below it, a quote I'd once saved on a sticky note now felt like armor. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom with good shoes. The inbox confirmed the send, and just like that, the cord between me and them frayed a little more. Downstairs, Dorian stood at the kitchen island with his coffee and a manila envelope. He didn't say anything when I walked in, just slid it toward me across the counter. Inside was a letter, crisp and simple, a formal notice. The small family trust, once filtered and shielded by Elowen's administrative oversight, had been legally reassigned. I was now the primary executor, a clause buried deep in paperwork Elowen had signed years ago when I funded our mother's mortgage to avoid a foreclosure that would have embarrassed her at church. She forgot, Dorian said quietly, that you own more than they ever gave you credit for. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The moment wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. By noon, the message had spread. Not from me. Not from Dorian. But the family grapevine has a way of dressing silence in scandal. Isolde tried to call. Twice. I declined both times. Let it ring. Let her sit in the space she'd created. An hour later, a single text appeared from Elowen. You're cruel! I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds before responding. No, I just stopped letting you write the story. I left it at that. No period, no flourish. The next morning, the gallery held a private opening for a new installation, Invisible Work. It was curated by my team, but it carried my fingerprints in every corner. A wall was dedicated to unnamed contributions, the people who build, design, clean, and coordinate, but never make it into press releases. In the center, etched in brushed steel, we remember ourselves when no one else will. MH. I stood in the back, letting the crowd press forward. I didn't want the attention. I just wanted to see it happen. A little boy tugged his mother's sleeve, pointing to the quote. Mom, is she famous? His mother looked over at me, studied my face, and smiled. She's something better, she said. She's real. I didn't cry. I smiled. Later that night, I returned to the car alone. Dorian had left earlier for a meeting, and I didn't mind the quiet. On the passenger seat was a small envelope I hadn't seen before. No name on the front, just my initials in faint pencil. Inside, a photograph, old, softened at the edges. My father and I couldn't have been older than 9. He was crouched next to me, arms around my shoulders, both of us grinning with ice cream in our hands. On the back, in his handwriting, you always belonged, even when they forgot. I held the photo against my chest for a long moment. Sometimes, the real inheritance is remembering who you were before they told you to be someone else.